Well, hi, thank you for checking in here on the BDR Lunch Gathering videos. We're glad you're here. We want to let you know that we have quite a few of these videos. In fact, if you go to the BDR site and check out our page, you'll find that here under News and Lunch Gathering, you'll find not only the fact that these educational web seminars are free, there is no cost whatsoever, but you'll find out what's coming up and a complete listing of all the different ones we've had in the recent past and over the past 2 years and a half. All these are good sources of information that I think you'll enjoy. So we invite you to check in, visit with us, and let us know how you appreciate them. There is a little button in the bottom here. It says subscribe. If you click on that to the little bell, you'll get a weekly reminder when new posts are made. And we, again, thank you for being part of our family.
Our buddies over at Nortel, as well as the folks at Kintronic, are the ones that are taking care of us. And
so what are the kind of things you would put in a comfort kit for? I mean, I know one thing obviously comes to mind, but what would you guys use?
Yeah, definitely. The toiletries are important, which I'm sure is what you were getting at. But yeah, I mean, just you probably want some non-perishable food in there for one, just to make sure that you've got something at the site that you can use to kind of sustain yourself. I don't know that this necessarily, maybe this is separate from your comfort kit, but definitely water as well. Keep water on site. Ideally, your site's not going to be in a situation where it gets below freezing and the water will freeze, but there are solutions to that as well. Yeah, just things like towels, things like, stuff to clean your hands, things to, yeah, I think, for instance, I mean, the kit that they show here is actually a pretty good start.
but we'll get started with our main topic here today, and that is EAS and the most recent NPRM. Now, Bill Robertson and I see Czarnecki are here with us from Digital Alert Systems. And I think we have Timm on the line from up in the Midwest. Gary has been a very active EAS advocate for quite a long time. As part of the broadcast morning working group that we have put together to advise the FCC on our thoughts on many things. And Gary has got his ear to the ground on almost everything EAS. So we're going to have an opportunity to talk, learn, ask some questions if you are a little confused. And so let me start by pointing out that we're basically going to talk about two of the things that the FCC has done over the last 2 months. In their September meeting, they issued a report and order. I mean, that's done now, requiring stations to use IPAWS CAP delivered audio, to wait 10 seconds if a local alert goes off to see if it will come from IPAWS. Manufacturers have until December of next year to do the upgrade, and maybe Bill or Ed would talk to us in a moment about the progress there and whether it's going to be a cost upgrade. And one of the other things the FCC is now going to do is, it's a bureaucracy, right? Lawyers, they're going to change the names of some of the alerts. We won't have an emergency action notification. It'll be a national emergency message. We won't have a national periodic test. It'll be a nationwide test of the emergency alert system, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we've spoken recently about security, about making sure that your transmitter site, your studio site are secure, and you don't put a mission critical gear right on the internet, even though some do. And as Jeff Welton showed us with Shodan, you can see hundreds and hundreds of barracks boxes. You can see a lot of other broadcast gear. And if you're one of these nefarious black hearts, they're open for attack, and it has happened. So the FCC, in a unanimous bipartisan decision this past month, has now issued an NPRM imposing requirements requiring broadcasters to secure and report on their EAS systems. You may remember the zombie alert in 2016. You may remember earlier this year, there was the evacuation for Los Angeles County and the Eastern Pacific Ocean. You may remember the one from Boston, where somebody took a weekly test and inserted the audio from the 2011 national EAN test. Unfortunately, it didn't go over the air on many stations because of the date issue, but it was done. The FCC says, we don't want to see any more of this. We want stations. And here is a place where contractors especially are going to have to pay attention. They want to know within 72 hours if there's been any unauthorized access or action with their EAS machines. They want to know about operational readiness. They want to reduce the amount of time you're allowed to have an EAS box out of service. And this operational readiness, this is going to be an interesting one, because one of the big problems in one of the national periodic tests a couple of years ago was a range of storms around the country with a lot of static on AM, which prevented the reception of the national test. So we have all these different things here to report promptly defective equipment, to submit more reports, more paperwork, and to create a cybersecurity risk management plan. So I'm going to start here, first of all, with Gary. You're on the phone, Gary, and so we'll let you have a first run at it.
Hey, Barry, you guys hear me okay?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I was talking with Barry earlier specifically about this new NPRM, and it kind of seems to me that broadcasters kind of brought this upon themselves, although some are shuddering at what they're reading as far as these cybersecurity rules. You know, the commission says right in the NPRM, we gave you numerous notices about updating your EAS units, securing your EAS units, and along comes the 2021 national test. And 5,000 EAS participants, over 5,000, reported right to the FCC that they were running out-of-date software in their EAS units, or using EAS units that were not able to be upgraded any longer. And 500 EAS participants reported that they were unable to carry the test due to missing, out for repair, or failures during the test of EAS equipment. So, I mean, you know, when people see they're not even running the latest software and don't care enough to even update their software before reporting back to the commission, I can just see how the commission's going, what on earth is going on here? So, I mean, they felt that they were compelled to do something here. So I guess we kind of brought this upon ourselves. I mean, granted, NIST and CISA level security is kind of swinging to the far end of things, as opposed to just a list of, you know, changing the default password and latest software. But I can see where the commission's coming from on this. So it'll be interesting to see how many people file comments and what the comments are and what actually comes out of this thing.
Okay, great. Now, don't go away, Gary. We'll ask you to keep listening and come back and talk to us more as things catch your ear. I'd like to turn to Bill or Ed, one of you guys. Would you address for us a little bit, first of all, what's going to happen with the CAP IPAWS arrangement, and how soon you expect the upgrade?
Well, Barry, how about we do this? Bill, let's have Bill talk about the product and the software updates, and I'll tackle the FCC quagmire we find ourselves in.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'll take that first one, and I will apologize early because I have to drop at the bottom of the hour. So it's good for me to plug this real quick, and then Ed can take it from there. So Barry, to that point on the way that the FCC has outlined the cap as the primary thing for audio, we have that in our product already. In fact, I think it was a couple months ago we showed trigger cap polling is what we call it. It was available in our version 4 software, so it's available right now for our systems. The primary idea with the trigger cap polling is that you can selectively say which event codes you want to apply and have it go look for a equivalent cap message. If it finds that, it uses the audio or the text information for that. So it's actually already in our systems today. We are looking at the rules. There's a slight change in how they FCC wants to mandate that. So we're looking at some tweaks, if you will, to kind of follow in line with that. The other changes that impact the systems right now are going to be these modifications to the text. So the string of text, instead of saying, an emergency action notification, it's got to read the string, as you said. Those strings have to be done in a certain way, and that's going to be a software update. At this particular point, as we're kind of doing all of our development in 64-bit space, it's going to be applied into our version 5 software. So everything that we've got and what we've been developing and what we're shipping right now since July has been new boxes with version 5. So we see the trigger cap polling thing pretty simple because it's just a tweak to stuff we already have. The text strings are pretty straightforward that we have to do, but there are a little bit of nuances in there relative to certain ways that they want it presented. Again, kind of if this, then that types of things. So our development and our focus and everything else is going to be, all of it is going to roll into a release of version 5. Most likely it's going to be a 5.1 release that we would probably see within the next couple of months.
All right. So are you suggesting people budget for that upgrade, or will they stay with the 4?
Version 4 is 32-bit. We're not doing any further development in 32-bit land, and that's the whole thing. So yeah, absolutely start budgeting, looking and seeing with that. And I think to the point that Gary just made too is, we have to be kind of cognizant that much the same way, probably a lot of us aren't running the same laptop we did 10 years ago. And the 32-bit processors are great, but 64-bit is where we have to go because that's where the development tools are. And the security and everything else that we're talking about, these new updates and patches are not being done in 32-bit space. So in order for us to maintain kind of the whole of our system, we have to kind of move that way too. So if you aren't, or if you have some questions about it, you definitely should be budgeting for updates. And that's not just from us, anybody else. If they're a system that's going to be software updatable, then something's probably going to come out from other manufacturers in the same way.
Okay, well, I appreciate that information, and I'm sure you'll be telling us more as we get closer and closer to that 5 point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I could add two points to amplify what Bill was saying. We introduced version 5 back in May of 2022, I think, or so. So version 5 itself was introduced 5 or 6 months ago. So this will be an update to version 5. Or whatever we add will be an update to version 5. The other nuance, I want to disagree with Bill a little bit. There's actually quite a bit to the rule that changes. We'll have to change the EAS device software. One big one is the need to now produce a semi-preloaded script or preloaded semi-script for the National Periodic Test. When we get an like Bill was saying, if we receive an NPT message, and if it is the all national code, and if it is received by EAS only, then we have to construct an EAS text sentence that is completely different than how EAS sentences are built in for any other event code. So this is a nationwide test emergency alert system issued by federal authorities. This effective this time to this time. This is only a test. So it sounds simple. We just spell script, but actually it creates a challenge in terms of having to create a new rule set within the product, that when you get a message with those defined circumstances and only those defined circumstances, you spit out this special sentence. What's interesting, though, is that if we get a regional NPT test, apparently we don't generate that script and we just go with the standard old message. So I'm a little confused by that, but such is the logic of the regulator. Which is why I'm quite sure we'll see nuanced adjustments to that rule over the next year or two as this plays out in the real world. Take a breath there.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. I didn't want to oversimplify it, but
our programmer was pulling out his hair out of his head a little bit when we were talking about this a week or two ago. Do they really want to do this? Yes, it's in the rules. And that is in the rules. So that's a published rule. That was published as of today. So the clock is ticking. And the other caveat before we talk about cybersecurity is I want to know, Barry, you mentioned that manufacturers have a year to get this out to the customers. Yeah, I guess technically we do, but that's a really bad idea, especially for larger enterprises that have formal regression testing, acceptance testing processes like cable and some of the larger broadcasters. So the EAS manufacturers, I think their clock is ticking on a much shorter timeline to field this update and then get that in the hands of customers for them to implement. And we all know how long it can take for software to be promulgated and sent out throughout industry, which is kind of a segue to exactly what Gary Timm was saying. Actually, I'm listening to Gary. I was trying not to chuckle. He hit every single one of my talking points perfectly. Industry has brought this upon themselves. No matter, and I think the FCC has heard clearly, and I'm making a very short segue here into the next topic area. The FCC understands very well at this point that no matter how many updates we as manufacturers push, no matter how much direct reaching out we have done, SAGE has done, the FCC and FEMA themselves have done, including individual phone calls from a senior FCC official at one point that were ignored. There is a staggering number of EAS participants that are very slow to update their software. In fact, some may have not updated their software a single time since first installing their device, regardless of manufacturer. There are still an alarming number of EAS participants that have left their EAS devices out on the public internet. And Bill, I don't know if I can, but I will anyway. I don't know if I can give out actual numbers. They've been referenced, but there are still about between 90 and 115 DASDECs out there that were left exposed. There are, by our count, over 800 SAGE units that are out there left exposed directly to the internet. This is a serious challenge, and in previous meetings, I think including this forum, I've been pretty vocal in saying we really encourage broadcasters like the guys and gals on this forum. You're interested enough, you show up to these types of forums, you talk about these things. There are obviously a solid number of EAS participants that, for whatever reason, are unwilling or unable to keep up with software updates or basic security. There are a good number of EAS participants, I suspect, that have no idea these rulings are coming out for whatever reason. No idea. They seem to have they seem to be operating in a silo. So this is a big challenge for industry. For us as a manufacturer, and I think for us, particularly in digital alert systems, we seem to become a specific target of researchers. Fair enough. I'm not quite sure it's why it's just us, given we're not the largest guys in the industry, but it's a burden on us when people install equipment, or any manufacturer for that matter, when people install equipment that's not designed to be connected directly to the internet, and they go ahead and connect it directly to the internet. And then they don't avail themselves of any security patches for 3, 5, 10 years even. The FCC recognizes this problem. The FCC recognized that this small little EAS industry is trying to field software updates. We are trying to keep up with security challenges, but as much as we do, the entire system is only as strong as the weakest link, and the weakest link is are those who are not doing anything. The weakest link in the system. Those even if you're a small low power operator in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't matter because you've left your systems exposed. So let me dive into. I'm sure I've raised somebody's hackles with those statements, but let me turn to talk a little about the rulemaking. And Barry, it's also a little broader than the summary, the excellent summary you gave. The FCC is not just asking about whether or not there should be a reporting system to report vulnerability, a report whether or not somebody's tried to get into your EAS box. No, what the FCC is saying, the entire system is vulnerable. Somebody here, I think Gary mentioned barracks boxes, anything in the air chain, if it's left exposed. The FCC, you could get into it. The FCC is asking whether there should be a system that would require reporting within so many, 24-hour cycles of an attempted intrusion to a firewall, a VPN, any other station equipment, not just the EAS box. It's a big request. It's a big request for broadcasters to report. I think it's going to be, frankly, a much larger request for the FCC to be able to gather this information, given 30,000 EAS participants with, God knows how many attempted intrusion events a week. The FCC is asking whether or not it should be, it should require cybersecurity plans to be filed. And the NIST guidelines, they require, they did reference some CISA and NIST guidelines. They are not that daunting using common sense, but this raises yet another problem. Many broadcasters are not IT engineers. Many IT engineers are not broadcasters. They're not paid to do that. You as a contractor may not be paid to be developing a cybersecurity plan. Trying to get the framework, the NIST framework guidance open here. If you follow the link, you can see. But you need to identify critical critical station processes and assets, document the information flows within the broadcaster, maintain a software and hardware inventory, establish policies for cybersecurity that include roles and responsibilities. You need to identify threats, vulnerabilities, and risks to your technical assets within the enterprise. That's just the identify part of the plan. Protect, manage access, protect sensitive data, conduct regular backups, securely protect devices, manage device vulnerabilities, train users, detect, test and update detection processes, maintain and monitor logs, know the expected data flows for your station, understand the impact of cybersecurity events. That means you need to be aware of and monitoring these cybersecurity bulletins. And then there's response, recover. I'll email the link to this. This is a recommended framework, or the one the FCC has recommended. Now, a large enterprise like a mega cable company or a broadcaster with 12 or 200 stations, yeah, they probably have the resources to hire people to do this. I'm a bit concerned of what this means for the smaller broadcast stations, radio or TV, or even the rural cable operator, the family-owned shop or the religious broadcaster that mainly relies on contract engineers. So the responsibility of this cybersecurity plan falls on whom, rhetorically speaking? Is it a radio engineer who knows little or nothing about this bigger cybersecurity area? Is this become an actual new business area for contractors? Now that you have to do all this paperwork, wow, that sounds like a great business area to develop. if it comes to pass. Now, these are just questions the FCC is floating. It's a notice of proposed rulemaking, but it really sounds more like a notice of inquiry to me. So it sounds like the FCC is speeding something along here. Another area they ask about is whether or not 60 days to replace your EAS gear is too long, whether it should be do it as soon as you can. We have some experience with that from Canada. The rules in Canada do not make an exception or allowance for downtime. They just require the system be up, and the last mile distributors, what they call broadcasters and EAS participants, they basically treat that as we need to have a spare on hand, or we need 24-hour turnaround in a fix. And it's daunting for us. It's daunting for them. We do have customers in Canada that have a batch of spares on inventory just for that contingency, particularly cable operators and a couple of the larger broadcast groups. They'll have 2 or 3 spare units in inventory should one have a fault for whatever reason. Dr. Pepper does happen up there as well into the machinery. That they'll have the gear ready to ship internally. But we do unfortunately get the panicked request from Canada. We had an electrical problem. We had an electrical fault. We fried our unit. Can you get us one tomorrow? If we have an inventory, absolutely. But got to go through customs or through our local distributor in Canada. Imagine that scenario playing out in the U.S. So that's kind of what the FCC is looking at. It's a lot. It could be really challenging. I'm very curious as well as to what industry and NAB and others will be filing. We can talk to a response, how industry may respond to that, but it's a pretty big deal. The FCC, I think, has had it. I see Bill giving the salute. He's got to take off.
I gotta go.
Well, thank you for being here, Bill. We appreciate that, and we trust that you and Ed will be back periodically to update us on these things.
Well, I'll leave Ed to sweep up. So I've just got to step away for another customer thing.
Ed?
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, Bill does the work. I just cause trouble in the industry. I'm just going to send that link to the NIST guidance right now, so you can. So at your leisure, you can take a look at what the framework is. But yeah, I think just a couple of random comments. The FCC's had enough. I mean, they see an alarming number of EAS participants with outdated software, missing the national test, and critically, Gary, I don't know if you mentioned this. Critically, not even buying a file on an ETRS. It's like industry is thumbing their nose at the FCC. That's a real bad idea. That's a real bad idea, and I think industry is going to pay for it now, in one way or another. I think. So I don't mean to be too alarmist, but a lot of our lesser brethren within industry have been a little frankly negligent in terms of responsibilities as broadcaster, not even on EAS, but in general system maintenance and in filing the required document forms and electronic filings with the FCC. But on the other hand, I would say that if the FCC is going to have a system like this, they need to start streamlining things. For example, and giving good examples of what to do. If they want cyber plans, they better have somebody provide a real template that can be used, not just refer to NIST or SISTA and say, come up with something. I know they're explaining by saying providing maximum flexibility for the broadcaster, but a lot of broadcasters and cable operators are not going to know what to do. They're not going to know how to compile a cyber plan. Another concern is you file their cyber plan and something goes wrong. Are you going to be held account for a technical violation of your file cyber plan? Another concern, and it might be a concern, may not, is now you are certifying in your plan. You're certifying. I would assume that means under penalty of perjury. You are keeping up with all your vendors' most current software updates across the enterprise, at least in terms of the critical path, EAS, VPNs, firewalls. Are you ready to sign that off on that as a contract engineer or as a station owner, that this indeed has been done? A lot of bear traps here. So let me stop there. I think I've talked myself out of breath, but that's, there are good aspects to what the FC is trying to do. I think their intentions are good. Their alarm, frankly, is warranted, given the premise that both Gary and I talked about. But the devil's in the details, and implementation of this could be rather onerous on broadcasters if not done right.
Okay, Gary, you want to follow up on that a bit?
Yeah, I guess to one of Ed's points on being responsible, even if you have a plan, they did say in the NPRM that the FCC proposes that the filing of and subsequent compliance with a cybersecurity risk management plan would not serve to be a safe harbor or excuse or any other diminishment of the responsibility for negligent security practices. Any negligence in protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of EAS that results in the transmission of false alerts or non-transmission of valid alerts would establish a violation of that duty regardless of the content of the plan. So just because you have a plan doesn't mean you get off the hook if anything does happen. Kind of what Ed was alluding to. But as far as especially the small guys knowing what it is that they need to produce for this plan, I was a little surprised, and I don't know, maybe they're expecting somebody to propose an FCC website similar to the EAS ARS site, where the EAS participant would log in and answer 99 questions or whatever it is the commission wants answered on. Have you, changed your default password? Are you up to date on the software? Have you done this, that, and as Ed mentioned, they point out that this applies to what's their term? Basically, every system in your station, not just your EAS unit, but all of your communication systems and services that could affect EAS alerts going out on the air. So this is beyond even just your EAS unit. So, I mean, I don't know if maybe, somewhat of a solution to what does the FCC really want for somebody to propose an ARS type thing, like, well, give us the 99 questions and require every EAS participant to go in and fill it out. I don't know. I mean, they have estimated 10 hours for the annual amount of time to develop this plan in the first year and update it in every second year. I don't know. I suppose that would be an amount of time that would cover entering things in blank fields like ARS is, but at least it would give small broadcasters a roadmap for what do you really want, instead of them coming up with something, crossing their fingers and hoping that's what the commission wants. Coincidentally, I've had conversations in the last couple of days with both the SBE EAS guy and with people at NAB that deal with EAS. I propose that maybe one of these groups come up with a template for their members to use. I didn't get a reply from SBE, and who I talked to at NAB said, yes, they're considering that. But I can imagine if there's any lawyers on the line would say, does either of those organizations want to be responsible for providing something to EAS participants that's supposed to, quote unquote, keep them compliant with FCC rules and take on that liability? So whether that is or isn't going to happen, but those are just a couple of thoughts I had on, especially for the smaller operations, about how they might be able to comply with this. And finally, in the compliance timelines, the commission recommends 12 months after the OMB approval appears in the Federal Register for these CRMP plans to be in place, and asks, should small business EAS participants, easy for me to say, be given an additional 12 months. So therefore, 24 months after OMB approval in the FR. So they are thinking about, the smaller operations, but as Ed points out, this kind of gets almost way beyond your typical contractor dealing with RF and keeping transmitters on the air. So I'll end it there and see, what anybody else thinks about this.
Yeah, Gary, I think you hit something key there when you mentioned expected 10 hours, the burden per broadcaster or per station would be 10 hours. That's 10 billable hours for whoever's doing the work. It's 10 payable hours for the station. So as the guy who receives phone calls screaming about how much a software update costs, but this type of labor burden is going to dwarf a software update.
Very good point. That is. Now, one of the things that was mentioned by you guys is, 5,000 reports indicated outdated software or inoperative EAS receivers. I think somebody had referred to the last NPT and commented that there was something like 82% or something like, was that the number? Ed, do you recall 82% received and relayed the National Periodic Test?
I don't know the exact number, but it was a significant number did, but also a significant number that did not. And after years of testing,
20% of stations, and
something like 20% of the system not functioning is I think in anyone's objective view unacceptable for gear and technology and a system that's been around since 1997.
Gary, I know some states like Michigan and in Alabama, they have set up with an outside vendor so they can have an instant readout of how many stations received a test and relayed it. Do you do anything like that in Wisconsin?
No, no, not really. And I think that's a Larry Wilkins project down in Alabama. And he basically reached out to every single broadcaster in the state and said, please add our Alabama Association of Broadcasters email to your EAS unit email list so we know when everybody got it. I'm not aware that Michigan's doing that, to my knowledge. I think Larry's the only one that's taken on that project. I frankly can't imagine managing such a thing. I mean, he's got like 500 email addresses coming in, I guess. I don't know. I mean, more power to him.
Michigan with Larry Estlak, they set up, I think it was MNet. I could be wrong, but
I believe they're not using EMNet anymore. The last I talked to them, they were no longer using that. The cost of the terminals and updates, and they had some other issues. So I'm fairly certain they're no longer using EMNet. In talking to them, just like a week ago, they're basically doing the same thing we are with this required second EAN path. They're getting their LP1 and LP2s to monitor either Premier Networks or SiriusXM in order to get that second EAN path. So I'm pretty sure that EMNet isn't part of their mix anymore.
I see.
I don't think EMNet was ever part of the EAN relay mix.
Okay.
We used to look pretty closely with ComLabs and Roland, the head of ComLabs, and for the states that still do use ComLabs, you can get a report back from the EMNet terminals of what's passed through, and in most cases that'll track the regular EAS traffic that's come through the EMNet terminal. But EMNet itself wouldn't be an EAN relay; it would be just whether the connected device has passed through, and they'd collect those reports, the LP1 or LP2, assuming they're using EMNet terminal. We have a system called Halo, which is mainly for enterprise use. We're pondering whether or not that could be used for a larger public sector role. But for example, our large cable operators use it to collect exactly this type of information in real time and aggregate it at a central point and get a central readout of DASDEC device performance. In one case, we have a cable operator with over 300 units, and they get immediate feedback on how the EAN or NPT or any other alert code has relayed through their system. We could we've been thinking about whether that could be a system used in a more generic role with DASDEX, as well as potentially talking to other vendors about it. But I think really the issue. Let's get back on track. The issue here, one of the issues here is burden of reporting. And I think, Barry, you've been vocal about this, but the whole 3-form reporting of ETRS, I think they need to collapse that down. I mean, I really don't see a reason why they couldn't have a single after action report filed within 24 hours, noting the success of the test, period.
Well, Form 1 and Form 2 theoretically are to make sure they have the current contact information. This is 2 FCC policies that are in, I won't say contradiction, but they're causing excessive work on the part of stations. The FCC says, whoever your contact is, if they change, new GM, new PD, whatever, you need to change your contact information in the LMS.
Right.
Well, that's all this Form 1 really is supposed to be doing.
Which is fine, but then now let's look 24 months from now, if they introduce a cyber ruling, when they have national tests, we have you'll have, not me, but you guys will have 3 ETRS forms to report. If you've got a cyber breach, you've got to report a breach. If you've got, and you'll have to report your certified plan. So your burden is what just take a guess here, probably 20 hours at least now of just reporting time to the FCC per annum, based on normal operations. And that's just for EAS. Never mind the other stuff you've got to file with the EAS. So other FCC stuff you need to file. So all of a sudden, this is looking like a heavy burden.
Yes, last week, as an example, I read a number of comments from different ones that were trying to file their political filings, where they're supposed to file the political sales, and they're supposed to do it immediately. And of course, last week, the whole FCC system crashed and nobody could file their FCC political reports. I'm going to ask here before we go on, I'm going to take a half a moment. If any of you that are with us today are on an SECC or an LECC, would you go down to the bottom of your page there where it says reactions and just raise your hand? Just give us a little count of somebody that might be on those committees. Go ahead, Ed.
That's great. Let me kind of go a different angle with this in terms of action steps. It's one thing to grouse about it or prognosticate. It's another thing of planning action. Now, if you look at the last several EAS filings, the EAS proceedings the FCC has filed, it's been the usual suspects who comment. Well, Gary Timm, Digital Earth Systems, Sage, NAB, and the cable operators, and that's pretty much about it. So I note there are 42 participants on this call, including Gary and myself. That's 40.
No, I got more on YouTube too. So
and on YouTube, you can't grouse. You can't grouse about the results of elections if you don't vote, as they say, and you can't grouse about what this is going to do to your business if you don't comment to the FCC. You can't expect NAB to carry the entire ball on this. As a matter of fact, NAB is really just one voice, a powerful voice, but just one voice. But the FCC had 40 voices in addition to NAB. That's a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah, we're going to get to. I want to get to where to do that. In fact, in just a moment. But we had 2 here. Brady and was it Randy mentioned that you're on one of these committees, and I've raised this before, posited. Should we start at the state level? Shouldn't the SECCs in each state know which stations in their state are not relaying or receiving these tests? I mean, to send all this stuff into the ETRS for the FCC to take 6, 8, 10 months to grind through, shouldn't the states be in a better position to know who's not working and how to get it fixed?
We asked, and the FCC said no. when ETRS first came out, all the SECs went, wow, this is great. All the EAS participants are reporting who they monitor. So FCC, please give us a list and we can go through and identify the ones that have made a mistake and are monitoring the incorrect stations, and we can help them correct that. Oh, no. Any information submitted to the commission is, quote, presumed confidential. No, even though you're the SECCs, you cannot see that. So we tried, and the same thing would be with individual reports of who had failures and who's had failures the last 5 years in a row. Great to know. The commission's lawyers will not allow that individually identified information to be released.
That's so much fun dealing with bureaucracy, isn't it?
I mean, the same is true with this ARS EAS plan entry website. The RNO itself said, oh, this will be a great place for EAS participants to go and look up their monitoring assignments. Well, once the lawyers got a hold of it, it's all presumptively confidential. No one can look at it but the SECC and federal agencies and state agencies that have FOIA security, but then they can't disclose it to anybody.
And even on the state sites, in many cases, it's behind a paywall or a signature wall or some sort. Brady, I saw your hand for a moment, went away. Were you an SECC or LECC guy?
I'm on the LACC here in Washington State. And as far as I know, it's up to the individual stations to communicate with the local or state commissions about whether they're compliant. We have a pretty good participation with stations locally here where I live in the area. And a pretty good email group. So if someone misses a test or for whatever reason, there's pretty good communication about why it is, and people are pretty well communicative about, hey, I missed a test, this is the reason, and that kind of thing. But I was interested by somebody who brought up a system that kind of adding the email address to a EAS box to send it to a central point. I hadn't thought of that, and I'm not quite sure any of the broadcasters here are going to be willing to do that, but it was a good idea, I thought.
It could be part of the filter so that it didn't send everything, but it would send just the fact that they got the monthly test, let's say. And that would, in essence, allow the SEC to know what's going on in the state. I think that's one of the big problems with the NPT, as it has been, is you get a storm roll through, and that just negates the whole purpose of that day's test. Whereas on a monthly basis, the state could know where things are, and whether it be volunteers from the SBE or local engineers or someone hired by the State Broadcast Association, these things could be helped, especially the small stations. Remember, LPFMs rarely have an engineer at all, much less a chief operator, which is not required, but maybe just for the form. But the idea is many of the contract stations, you have contractors that will handle 15, 20 stations. And are they going to know if one station missed, if the internet was out that week, or if somebody just turned it off by mistake? We don't know that question.
Yeah, somebody had brought up in another conversation I had that because broadcasters are licensed, by the FCC seems to care more about the actual licensees rather than the test or emergency originators that originate the EAS, alerts. We had with the national test here, at least in my region, one of the stations was using a XM Sirius national test, and there was no audio on it. There was the tones and there was 30 seconds of silence. And so all the EAS boxes, or a lot of the EAS boxes I take care of, because that was the first thing to hit the box, that's what they aired. And it covered up all the other tests that had audio with it. So I think that is more solely in the place of the fault of the originator than the individual stations. And that's something I don't see the FCC addressing very well.
Well, yeah, again, you're dealing with the bureaucracy and what they can deal with, which is piles of paper and bureaucrats and adding machines. You may remember it was not too many years ago that a station in Southern California was fined almost without any activity here or what's going on, fined $5,000 for having a monthly test go bad. Well, that's why we test. We test to see, and every so often, one of the boxes will have a power supply issue or something, and no EOM will happen. Well, that's a failed test. That's not a violation. And it took a lot of people telling the FCC that they'd overstepped their bounds a little bit, and they cut it back to an admonishment, which is the bureaucrats' way of saying, oh, we screwed up, but we'll just tell you it's your fault.
Hey, Barry, do we have just 5 minutes left?
I'm sorry?
Do we have just 5 minutes left? We should really get to trying to talk about filing comments.
We have plenty. Yeah, I mean, those are going to.
I mean, I don't know if people expect to be done at the top of the hour, but since we got 40 people on the line, I mean, I just really wanted to echo Ed's last comments about please file comments.
Yes.
The FCC says over and over, they do not make these decisions just pie in the sky, pulling them out of their hat. They feel they need to make any decisions based on comments that are filed. You'll notice every time they say we're doing this, and then they cite 5 or 6 different people that filed comments that agree with the decision they're making. So if you don't file comments to either say how you'd like to see this or what you don't want to see happen, you know, all it takes is 1 or 2 people to say something screwball, and the commission's going to hang their hat on that. So if you've got an opinion on any of this, please file comments. What is filing comments? Go to fcc.gov/ECFS. Super simple. Electronic Comment Filing System. Then in the docket number, you just put 15-94. That's the EAS docket. And then you can file your comments, they'll ask for your name and all that stuff. Comments do not have to be in any specific format. You can go and you'd click on file a comment in order to file one. If you want to look at some of the comments to see what other people did, you can go and look up a comment and put that 15-94 to see the format other people use. But you can do anything you want. Any old Word document you can put up there or put it up as a PDF. Any format you want. All they want is your name and what are you responding to. So it's no special form. It's no special format. As Ed says, if you don't vote, you can't complain. So anything to add, Ed?
No, well stated. Oh, yes, well stated, Gary. I believe when you click to start a comment, you can even just add in plain text if you want. Just type in on the form or upload any number of documents types. Word is best. PDF is best. Word is good. You don't have to use fancy lawyer format. You can put it on company letterhead or just plain form. The FCC is looking for comments that are related to the specific proceeding.
Which one do we want to use down here, Ed?
We could express filings, for example. See express comment. You can do a standard filing or express filing. Actually, it's a search. It's a different thing. You're searching for filings. You're not creating. So if you go to the back up to the top, Barry, very, very top, and you see filing, search, and filing. hit under filing. Not search. Up one, filing.
Oh, I'm, hold on a second. My screen isn't fully there. Okay. I have to, let's see, there we go, filing.
And now when you go to filing, submit a standard filing, you put in 1594, 15-94 as
Or 22,239, or 320.
well, no, 1594 is the proceeding.
Mhm.
That's the proceeding. The other number is a docket number. You don't care about that.
Oh,
Your required elements. Okay. Don't you love when it says, okay, so name of the filer would be your name or your business's name. Barry, Michigan Broadcasting. Law firm if you're using one. Now, attorney author name, optional. So if the filer and the author are different, you might want to put that in. This is lawyer type stuff. When I file, it's typically digital alert systems, and I don't put in my name as the filer. Other larger enterprises may use an outside law firm, and they'll note the law firm and the author. Primary email account, good. Keep going down. Type of filing, comment in this case, or in the second stage, reply to comments. So important to note, when an NPRM comes out, you have a comment period and a reply comment period. The comment period is 30 days, and then the reply comment period will be 30 days after that, within 30 days after that.
You mentioned that it was published in the Federal Register today?
Yes, it was. So the comment period is now open.
So-
File number, report number, bureau ID number, ignore all that. Address of your entity. Now, this is harder for those of us who, those of you who are self-employed or work from home, but you put in your address of the law firm or the author. Oh, we're all going to visit Barry here at his home. And okay, obviously put in your stuff. Now, do they still have the phone number block in here?
No, don't see one.
No, okay, that's good. That's good. It'll at one point they had phone number, and my personal cell phone number dropped in accidentally. I had to beg them to withdraw the filing to remove my cell phone, my own cell phone number. Do you want email confirmation? Yes. That's helpful as it goes through. Now up here in the box above that, you can click or drop files here. So you just click there, and now we look inside of Barry's computer. But you could, if you have already written your comments, you just upload them there. That's it, in text, PDF, or doc form, and then you submit. Don't submit, Barry. It goes to a review screen to verify that this is how you want to send it. Oh, you acknowledge. Yeah, standard acknowledgement. It's not hard. The time to talk this through actually is much longer than it actually takes. You're just filling out a form with your information. 15-94 is the proceeding, and that auto directs it to that filing. In your comments, you can refer to in the latest cybersecurity proceeding or in the cybersecurity notice of proposed rulemaking. You don't have to get all formal about it. If you want to wait, a little bit and say how other people are formatting, that's fine. But you can just say, in regards to the cybersecurity notice of proposed rulemaking, and then introduce yourself, and then try to answer some of the questions or respond to some of the hundreds of questions that the FCC has fielded in that rulemaking, or provide more global commentary. The FCC is not looking for comments like "this sucks," or "you have your mind," or "this is wonderful, regulate us." They're looking for a little bit more detailed input. And we've had a lot of discussion here, Gary and myself, some thoughts, yes, require a cybersecurity plan, but give us more guidance. It is absolutely required for us to give us a template. Small broadcasters will require something more simple, an option more simple to fill out online, check boxes or drop downs. Do you have this in place?
Are your comments already filed?
I don't think Digital Alert Systems is going to file on this one, only because we're not a broadcaster and we wouldn't have to file, so it's kind of not in our wheelhouse.
No, I'm just thinking of you yourself here. That
I wear a number of hats. I'm also chairman of the Next Gen Video Information Systems Alliance. I've got a request from 2 of the broadcast members to see if NVISA could do an association and alliance filing. So we'll be talking about that in our next meeting, whether or not we want to file.
because I was going to show everybody what you're filing, but it's not
Yeah,
there.
no. Yeah, and actually, I wouldn't file it. It'll probably one of the council of one of the broadcasters will do the
Okay.
the heavy lifting.
Bill,
on that.
I see your hand's been up for a while. Probably have something you want to add. You'd unmute you first.
Right. Okay. Well, I see all this stuff come, and I see it come from the FCC, and I see it come from the FAA, and it'd be great if the people that are at these agencies had, and I don't necessarily demand that they have some engineering background. That would be too much to ask, but that they have a basic concept of figuring out what kind of problem they're trying to solve, and figuring out proposing ways to solve it, or go find people who know how to solve it. But they don't do that stuff. They just say, well, we'll just litigate it. That's the solution. Litigate it and find it.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you respectfully on this one. So that's why I'm kind of on the fence on what the FCC is doing with this rulemaking. For 10 years now, the FCC has been reaching out to broadcasters either en masse or individually. I remember vividly working, getting calls from the White House, for God's sake, at 9 o'clock at night for the State of the Union address. But I remember vividly Greg Cook, who was at that time with the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, senior branch chief. He called up a broadcaster personally. The deputy chief of the FCC's Public Safety Homeland Security Bureau calls up a radio station personally, and the radio station says, "Yeah, I'll take that on advisement," and blows him off. Okay, that's one anecdote from a decade ago. Now, on the record, the FCC is a creature that's based on the record. They know they've done the outreach. They know the manufacturers have done the outreach.
I think so. Yeah.
They know the rest of us, the trade press has done the outreach. So what more can the FCC do to, quote unquote, encourage broadcasters, EAS participants, to keep their systems secure, to keep their critical systems like EAS up to date, given that they've done everything they can do short of enforcement? So I'm kind of seeing both sides of it. Yeah. I mean,
I wonder if any member of the SBE hierarchy was involved or listening to the webinar on the BDR broadcasters.
Mute all, Barry.
Yeah. Okay. Done.
Yeah, Ed, I know. I guess it's probably frustrating from all sides, but back in the bad old days, when agencies had experts in the fields they were trying to regulate, they do things like they'd say, well, we're trying to solve this problem. We're in charge of the specifications. Let's change the specifications so that it addresses this problem, or let's require a procedure that addresses this problem. Even things like what they used to call them. They essentially present prototypes and say, this is kind of the thing we had in mind. And if you build something like this and implement something like this, then it's going to be easier for us to verify that you've met the spec. And I don't think that that there's lots of shortcuts these days. Companies can use a real-time operating system that's already been vetted and by security agencies, not the FCC, but like NSA and those folks, so at least as far as the operating system is concerned, you don't have to like unravel that ball of yarn and lay it all over your table. You know that works. Now you just have to create an application on top of it that doesn't undo all the work that's been done. I guess I'm lucky. I have a communication security background from the military, and I have telecommunications and networking background in addition to my broadcasting background. But it's more frustrating for me to see this stuff. It's nice that finally the FCC is getting an idea what the threat environment is, but the threat environment isn't new.
No, it's been there for quite some time.
No, but that's also what the FCC is saying in the NPRM itself. The threat environment isn't new, and
it's changing constantly.
And it's changing, but at the same time, if we just tunnel into two things, I think the FCC is referencing, and there's a lot more. But if there are somewhere north of 900 EAS participants that are not securing EAS gear with firewalls, if there's something north of thousands of radio stations not securing barracks boxes properly, there's a serious problem here. If the FCC is saying, I don't know what the percent is, but 30% or more of EAS participants are not maintaining their EAS gear, i.e. not having software up to date, or even having software devices that are software supported, that's a pretty serious problem. So what is a regulator to do? I mean, when you have, what's the old saying? When you have a hammer, everything's a nail. They've only got a limited set of tools at their disposal. They tried fairly creatively to engage industry through memos out direct from the FCC, partnering with FEMA to get things out, engaging with the manufacturers directly to make sure they were securing and trying to keep up and secure their gear. But at some point, the guy who only has a hammer as a tool realizes that our gentle outreach is not working, and the threat environment is getting worse. I was talking to a reporter, a couple of weeks ago. I mean, this is kind of a perfect storm environment for the FCC. You've got a volatile international climate. You've got where quite possibly the EAN may actually be used. God help us. That was not. If you look at the rhetoric, the 1962 style of rhetoric coming out between the U.S. and Russia. Okay, what if you got one job, that's to maintain the EAN, all of a sudden you realize 20% of the system doesn't work? Not good. If you look at the threat, and then there's another little thing that came out with a researcher who decided to get out there with some information before the DEF CON security conference. So all this comes together in the same short span of months. The FCC, I think. I'm not criticizing them. The FCC had to react as a bureaucracy, as an organization. You can't ignore this one, and they are reacting the way a regulator can react. It's you're gonna have to start certifying that you're towing the line on security, and ... I'll go further. ... If you're not towing the line, I think then the FCC would start looking at sanctions.
Ed, I have two questions when it comes to the cybersecurity portion that you're talking about right there. One, who is going to certify the cybersecurity plan that you have to submit? Number two, if something goes wrong, who is going to end up, we submit this cybersecurity plan, something goes wrong, is there going to be a fine imposed?
Those are two questions everyone in this forum should be asking the FCC when they, not if, but when they file comments. Those are great questions.
I'm going to take us back to the FCC site here. And this is for the cybersecurity part. the docket 22-329. And one thing has already been filed, and that's this fellow here, Frank Bell. And just so you can see what it looks like, you should be able to see this here. And this is a format that you can use for your comments. It doesn't have to be double spaced. It doesn't have to have an attorney sign off, but you do have to tell them what you're commenting on here. And it doesn't have to be all three of these. It could just be the cybersecurity part, or it could be the other part up here. And then you just tell them what you want to tell them.
Yeah.
And here he's ticked off 4, 5, 6 items that he wanted to make his point off.
Now, actually, this is a good example, Barry, of what I was saying don't do. So he's using this as a platform to talk about stuff that has nothing to do with this proceeding. This almost guarantees that a file like this goes into the circular file.
Okay. But the format of how to do it.
The format is one format you can use. You can a number of people have filed using Word. You can just borrow their formatting on Word.
My point was I was trying to show that it's very informal. It doesn't have
it can be very informal now, and the FCC doesn't stand on format with these things. It's more about what you say, not how you present it. And for Daniel's questions, which I think were really, two very key questions. If you read the NPRM, the guy, the organization, it's self-certification. You are certifying that this is your plan. This is what you've implemented, and in that plan, you're keeping up with software updates and all the other stuff. So it's it's a good question of whether that's an organizational cert or an individual certification. And then again, if there's an error, and the FCC's Gary pointed out, the FCC did not specify penalties. What they did specify is that this is not a get out of jail free card. If there's an oops, filing a plan is not going to absolve you of consequences if there's an unauthorized EAS being issued. But what's not talked about is if your contractor says, let's say your station manager, you file, your contractor says everything's good to go, but it's not. This gets you in that whole area of have you filed a false report with the FCC? Was that inadvertent? And if even so, even with this inadvertent, who bears a responsibility, if any, for filing a cybersecurity plan that was in fact defective? So this raises all sorts of questions in my mind that a lawyer would better to answer. But there's a lot administratively that needs to be addressed. But substantively, again, the whole idea of having this, do you have to certify the cyber, or do you have to upload a cybersecurity plan annually? Well, that's what it sounds like. So that's, again, 10+ hours a year on just the cybersecurity report that somebody's going to have to pay for. And not everybody.
Well, there's nothing in this NPRM, at least as far as what the commission's proposing, that says such a plan has to be uploaded anywhere. They say thou shalt have a CRMP plan, and it shall be made available for FCC inspection upon request. So all they're saying is that you have to have one. You don't have to submit it anywhere. So there's no one there at the commission to say it's good enough or isn't good enough until they would request to see it.
And you don't have to implement it properly.
Right.
Well, I mean,
yeah, just one question. I saw in the Federal Register today that the CAP prioritization R&O is in there. You were not saying that this cybersecurity NPRM is in there, right?
No, the cybersecurity NPRM, as far as I can tell, has not even been placed in the queue for publication.
Right, because I mean, it normally these things take a month to a month and a half to be in the Federal Register. So I think there was maybe a misconstruing when we were looking earlier at the ECFS site. The Cybersecurity NPRM has not yet been, that comment period has not yet started, and probably won't for at least a month. So it gives you plenty of time to get all your ideas together, and you can file your comments anytime you want.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. And that's a really important point. That's point number two, why Frank's filing there, the very open, that could be rejected. The FCC is pretty, it can be lenient about time windows, but he filed comments before the hunting season was even open. So technically that's a DQ right there. And then filing a bunch of comments that have nothing to do with the proceeding gives the reader, the FCC, not any real reason to pay attention to what he's writing about.
Yeah, I mean, I would strongly recommend when I do my comments, I go through and say, in paragraph 14, that the FCC, quote, proposes to blah, 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 and quote the NPRM, so they know what it is you're talking about. And then my comments are kind of thing, so they can equate it to the things they're proposing, and not just rambling with do this, do that, and I don't like this and I don't like that. They like, particularly when you target your comments to the particular thing they're proposing, or maybe it's something you are proposing as an alternative, but generally they don't take up on new proposals all that much, even if it's a better idea. They're looking for comments on their own proposals as a general rule.
Yeah. So Barry, just for the sake of time, but also making this effective, what I'd suggest is humbly, there's enough here to talk about in detail in a future Thursday meeting. If we go through the individual questions, or have more people here to present on what the burning questions are within the rulemaking. For now, I think it's enough to say, hey, this is on the radar. You guys should get a copy of this and read it. And then maybe when it is published in the Federal Register, reconvene and see if it's time to have a group writing party for individual filings.
Well, that's the reason I really wanted to bring it forward today. I wanted to give everybody as much of that 30 days as possible to file a comment and make sure that
the 30 days hasn't even started yet. So,
well, you said it was published in the register.
No, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The CAP and EAN order was published as of today. That's the year clock on that is out. The cybersecurity bulletin, or NPRM, has not been published yet. It will probably be out towards the end of November or early December. Excuse me, mid-December or early January, excuse me.
Right. And if you don't have a copy of this cybersecurity NPRM to read, if you just go to the FCC headlines on fcc.gov and go down to October 27th, you'll see a description there of the EAS cybersecurity NPRM, and you can download either a PDF or a Word version.
The link is
or
also
you can just
on the
search for
BDR.
FCC 22-82 is the.
You can also get that on the BDR. If you go up here to articles, and then it says latest EAS, the links will be right there.
So do read it, and it's actually pretty short. It's only about 25 pages of comment of content, including what the proposed new rules are. It's often twice that. So this was a pretty easy read. The thing itself is like whatever, I don't know, 50 some pages, but the whole back end of it is just gobbledygook about small businesses and junk. So all you really need is like the first 20 pages of what they're really proposing, and then Appendix A is what the proposed new rules are. That's all you really need to read.
I just posted a link to the ECFS, the ECFS page with the cyber filing as well.
Bill, your hand's up again there.
Yeah, I just wonder if anybody has ever suggested that hey, it's great that the station manager thinks it's secure, but maybe the station manager isn't the most technically able to make that assertion. And that may be proposing that instead of saying, well, sign an affidavit once a year that you're secure, once a year, hire or, at least have one of these automated security analysis thing try and attack your station from outside and give a report that, hey, we tried and it didn't work. That would go leagues, I would think. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things like what can an internal attacker do, or what can an attacker with physical access do? But there's so many of these kind of online things, like you may pay $50 to have somebody run it, but they're going to say, oh, well, this port is open and I was able to log into this Windows machine, or hey, I see your EAS box, and these ports are open.
And Bill, the challenge is you're saying the right thing, but the guys who are most at risk are not even going to be able to get that far in terms of their thinking. To be honest with you, I mean, we're talking about guys who, for whatever reason, buy an EAS appliance, stick it on the open internet, and don't update the software for 10 years. They right. and they're convinced it's secure.
Mm-hmm. But if an outside firm gives them a security report and they're required to forward that to the commission once a year, then eventually they'll figure it out.
Well, here's the thing. These are the same guys who neglect to follow with the ETRS test reporting system. The same guys who apparently don't even know the FCC exists except for getting their initial license. Mm-hmm. They are, yeah. Yes, it's a small segment of the EAS community. We're talking about maybe 1,000 out of 30,000, 1/30th.
Yeah,
but they're causing the headache for everyone else. I'm being really blunt here. At the risk of offending anybody, you've got 1/30th, whatever the percentage is of that. I'm not a math major. You've got 1/30th of the broadcast and the cable industry that have effectively caused this. I mean, yeah, it's one problem to be out of date with your software, and you may have problems with national test. That's an effect of what we're talking about. But there's that proportion of the EAS community that is utterly, and I'm going to say it, they're utterly negligent.
But that kind of,
and they're not going to file. They're not going to file these cyber plans anyway because they're not going to know about it for whatever reason.
You come up for licensing every 5 years or whatever it is, and if they go back in their files and say, you haven't filed a national test report, you haven't filed a security report, you don't, your public file isn't up to date. We don't think we're going to relicense you until you get this stuff straightened out. Then I suppose they can scream, hey, we didn't know. But that's never been a really great excuse that any government agency I've ever been involved with has taken seriously.
Yeah.
But they don't. But I mean, back to my point. I mean, they need to figure out what problem they're trying to solve and how to solve it, and what tools they have to do that with. And if they let the miscreants just kind of go on their way and keep relicensing them, is that solving the problem, or is that just pushing the problem off onto the people who, it's like only bad guys will have guns argument, but solve the problem, identify the problems and figure out how to solve them. Just don't run around in circles and make more regulations. That's just dealing with even local government, and so I was a port commissioner for a while. And one of the arguments I always had with people is to legislate like you have an intent in mind. You know, and legislation isn't an end unto itself. And I used to have this conversation with my fellow port commissioners and county commissioners and city councilmen. You know, if you have no idea where you're going, then you know any rule or regulation will do. But that shouldn't be the case.
All right. Anyone else in our group here have a comment they'd like to share with us, or let us know you're planning to file a comment with the commission when it's open?
Go. All right, Art Race here.
Hi, Art.
Yeah, I've been listening for a long time. This is my first webinar for the BDR. Incredible. A lot to get your arms around. There are three of us who have been involved in this meeting this afternoon, who are members of the SBE Education Committee. I put in a call to Jim Ragsdale a few minutes ago, suggesting that the SBE needs to get involved, not just with comment filing, but with helping contract engineers along in endeavoring to keep the stations in their charge on the straight and narrow with regard to this. Everything that everybody says about the commission's motivation in dealing with this is true. I have worked for very good broadcasters, and I have worked for very bad broadcasters, and I've worked for a lot of them in the middle who just want to keep doing what thumb your nose and stop laws at the FCC, but they need somebody in there to be their conscience. They need a Jiminy Cricket. So that's what we contract engineers should be doing. And for that reason, I think that the SBE needs to get involved and help the contract engineers help the stations. And that's a little of what I have in mind. I'm going to be talking to one of my biggest clients in about 2 hours. But for right now, I have to go. I have a therapy session, a physical therapy session to get to, after which I'm going to sit him down and talk to him, taking the laptop with. This is serious stuff. He's got the email, and I put the comments, or rather the NPRM from the FCC for all three NPRMs into him. I don't even know if he's read it, but I'm going to make him do it. You know, so there it is. I just think there's a role for us to play, we who are contract engineers, in getting this EAS system straightened out in as much as possible. That's it.
Well, we're glad you made it in today, Art. Thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
Any other comments about EAS in general, or anything else?
Thanks, Barry. It's been great. Good discussion.
Thank you, Gary. Really appreciate your checking in and sharing with us today.
Okey-doke.
Hope to see you again one of these days when you're maybe able to be at a desktop somewhere with a camera on it.
There we go.
Have a good one.
All right. Catch you guys later.
All right, Jeff, what's on your mind? I see you unmuted yourself. Or was that the hurricane that unmuted you? Well, I guess I made a mistake. one of the things I've written about occasionally and have spoken about here on the Thursday presentation. EAS is, some people would say it's critically ill. That it's there only for the government to do two things. One, to fine you for not doing your weekly and monthly tests. And two, so the president can talk to you if he wants to. I know a lot of stations have basically turned their box off aside from those three things and do not relay anything else. GM or the PD says, hey, this is interfering with my programming. So some would say that EAS is dying off. Others will say this is a unique opportunity among all the things out there, streaming and podcasts and whatnot, for radio to differentiate itself as an informer and a valuable member of the community. Am I the only one thinking that way?
Well, we have thought that way, Barry. Back in the good old days, it seems to me that there was, that broadcasters were required or expected to operate in the public interest, and now broadcasters think they have a piece of property that belongs to them, and that they don't really owe anybody anything. It just, they owe their stockholders, but do they owe their public at all? It's different, I suppose. We're kind of engaged in non-commercial broadcasting, so we kind of we hope that people will appreciate what we do and contribute to the operation. And it's been very successful. And part of what's been successful for us has been that we've been very engaged in our emergency preparedness, and all the trappings around that, to the extent that the Office of Emergency Services has set up a studio for us inside the Emergency Operations Center. We're not waiting outside the gates for the press release. We're actually in there. We have people trained, taking the FEMA courses to understand what's going on in the EOC and to operate inside the EOC. And we go out to make pitches to people why they should support the station. And one of those things is that we're there for you guys. We're there for the community when the community needs us. And you can't say that if all you do all day is underwear commercials, and play reruns of I Love Lucy.
Well, that's unusual. But many emergency managers want nothing to do with radio.
Yeah,
they would rather do reverse 911. And in places like Paradise, California, or Boulder, Colorado, when the fire burned the lines down and there was no telephone or cell, the sheriff sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, we tried."
It is an unfortunate circumstance that most emergency managers think that radio stations and television stations, don't read the press releases that we give them, and they make suppositions and they tell people the wrong stuff. Most radio stations and television station news people think that any government agency that's out there handing them a press release is trying to cover up something, and they want to know what it is.
Sometimes
there's a natural antagonism there, but it doesn't serve the community to have that.
Hey, Grady, I see that you've unmuted. Got something to add?
Yeah, I have a couple of quick comments. I'll preface it by saying that a couple of weeks ago here in the Boston area, There was a newspaper article about a radio station that was sold to a new owner. It was a pirate, and it made the newspaper. It was like a big deal, right? And in all of my arguments, when I try to assist mass broadcasters or other entities to try to get local support from state and local government to help shut down pirates, I talk about we provide things that the public needs, whether they realize it or not. And one of the main anchors of my argument is that we have emergency alert system. We do provide it, and none of these pirates do anything like that. So if some big deal happens and people are listening in the community to one of these pirates, they're going to be completely oblivious to what's going on. So that's how I feel about that. With respect to the FCC's NPRM right now, I see it this way, though. If you look at the egregious amount of record keeping and reporting that Sound Exchange puts broadcasters through if they're going to stream their audio, remember that for several years there, broadcasters stopped streaming because they couldn't either afford to do it, or they didn't know how to do it, or they couldn't find IT people to automate it. And so Sound Exchange stuff caused many radio stations to simply stop streaming. In this case, we can't stop doing what we're doing if we decide that we just can't satisfy the FCC. If we can't satisfy the FCC, if this does become a part of the regulations, we have to turn our license in if we can't figure out a way to do it. That's all.
Well, it's certainly a big bite to swallow, as posited by the NPRM. As Ed made the point, yes, maybe this is where we need to ask them, did you really mean for us to spend half our working hours compiling paperwork? I'm, of course, a little bit chagrined when Ed pointed out that he made a mistake, that this has not become part of the comment period yet. And I will make that announcement when I hear about it in the newsletter and here. So I sure hope that you will take the time to read at least the summaries and formulate some thoughts, more than that sucks and close your mouth.
I mean, I suppose there's a startup opportunity here to write those plans.
Oh yeah.
So that
new business.
That's the upside. I mean, you can write the plans, and you know, I have to own up to the fact that, you know, I try and maintain security, but sometimes I screw up, and if I don't audit the systems, no matter how good my plan was and how good I think my implementation was, sometimes it's screwed up. And if I don't test it, I don't know it. And that I don't see any hint of a thought that, you know, you have to kind of establish that you've actually accomplished what your goal was. Seems to be very stick heavy.
I think that's a really excellent point from Bill, that, you know, a plan is one thing, execution is another. You may certify you have a plan, but just ask the Russians, a good plan can go sideways any number of ways. So, you know, does this rulemaking mean, you know, what are the implications for the organization saying they've got a plan? You know, will you actually be held account if the VPN fails or if the firewall fails? You know, what is the level of accountability here? That's really ambiguous in this line of questioning from the FCC.
But to a degree, isn't that the way the FCC works? They throw ambiguities out and hope that the lawyers will narrow it down later.
I think from their perspective is they don't want to box anyone in. They're trying to provide as much wiggle room as possible, but wiggle room in any regulation is a scary thing. It can go, you know, it can work against you or for you. Likewise, Barry, thanks for inviting me in. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Ed. We really appreciate your expertise. And I was going to drill you a little bit more on CISRIC, but maybe that's another day.
I'm no longer a member of CISRIC and have those hours back in my life, but
Oh, good for you.
Yeah,
We've talked about that, that time black hole.
I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.